Jackson Bedford, Judge Jackson Bedford. He is going to actually introduce our guest today and a few other folks that are related to our program. I want to hand it over to you, let you talk in there, and I'll hand this to the judge. How's that?
That works. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And George, if it doesn't pick up, tell me. First of all, I want to thank all of you for showing up for this program. This organization has a lot to do with the success of the Veterans Court in Fulton County, which is going to be addressed in a few moments by our two speakers, which I will introduce. But you ask yourselves, and many people have, why a Veterans Court? 1 in 5 of our veterans has PTSD, 2 times as likely as the general population to be homeless. 1 in 6 has a substance abuse disorder. 60% of the women now coming out of service suffer from PTSD, from actually sexual harassment, and not necessarily a combat situation. In 2010, more vets, and this is still true statistic, lost on active duty were lost to suicide than war. And the statistic is still roughly, and I saw this the other day, that there are 22 deaths per day related to suicide among veterans. So that is extraordinarily high. 70% are over the age of 50. So it's my pleasure today to introduce to you our two speakers. First speaker is going to be the Honorable Judge Todd Markle, who is my colleague on the Fulton County Superior Court, and then Cary King, one of our own. Judge Markle is a graduate of the University of Georgia, where he obtained his BA in 1996 in political science. In 1989, he received his JD degree from Mercer. After law school, Judge Markle practiced civil litigation with the firm of Miller and Markle. And in 2011, he was appointed or asked by Governor Deal to become his executive counsel, where he served with the governor for 1 year. He was appointed to our Superior Court bench in Fulton County in 2011, and in 2012, Judge Markle agreed to become the first judge of the Veterans Court, which was newly created in the Superior Court of Fulton County. Now, the court started operating roughly 1 year ago. This is basically about our anniversary, 1 year. And Judge Markle now supervises 35 defendants, who we like to call enrolled as clients of the court. And he is married and has 2 children. And Cary King, I'm going to go ahead and go through both introductions. Cary is a man that needs no introduction to this group, but he's going to get one anyway. Cary received his BA from Georgia State University in 1963. Now guess where Cary went from there? Vietnam, as we all. After leaving active duty in the Army in 1970, he returned to civilian life, and along the way he attended graduate schools at Georgia State University and the University of Alabama School of Finance and Economics. And Cary didn't tell me whether he graduated or not, so he just threw those out, so they sound impressive anyway. In 1983, he received his law degree from John Marshall School of Law, and he's practiced law since that time as a principal of several law firms, and he now practices emeritus with his son Scott's law firm. This is what's important about Cary that maybe a lot of you do not know. In January of 2013, at the State Bar meeting here in Atlanta, Georgia, he was honored by the State Bar of Georgia by being awarded the Marshall Tuttle Award as the Outstanding Lawyer of 2013. This award was given by the Military and Veterans Affairs section of the State Bar for services that Cary has rendered to the veterans of this state for the last 16 years by founding and operating a free veterans legal clinic at the VA hospital on Claremont Road. Now, this program has been recognized by the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, and Cary's clinics have now been started in several other VA locations throughout the state. And when the Veterans Court was ramping up down in Fulton County, I asked Cary, along with Scott Delius, who couldn't be with us here today, but Scott's a lawyer and Army Reserve major, and some of you might have seen him out at the dedication at the History Center. He's a veteran in Afghanistan. I asked them to assist me in setting up the mentoring program. And as typical of Army types, that was all that was needed. They took the lead, and the program is that you're going to hear about it today. Cary is married with 5 children and 6 grandchildren, and I'm proud to present both of these speakers to you today. It's a great program they're going to be talking about, which has been developed for our veterans who get involved with the criminal justice system here in Atlanta. And our first speaker will be Judge Markle, who will speak about the Veterans Court program in Fulton County Superior Court. And Cary will follow up and speak about the mentoring program to which all of you are invited to become participants. Then we'll have a follow-up question and answer period, time allowing. So if you would please welcome our speakers, and Judge Markle will come up first.
Thank you, Jackson. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. There's so many familiar faces that I see out there. So many of you have spent and dedicated a lot of time to our organization and what we're trying to do down at the courthouse. And I would spend the half hour allotted to me trying to thank all of you. We really do appreciate it. There are a couple people in particular that I did want to acknowledge. First of all, Pat Gartland. I wanted to thank Pat for inviting me today. He has been one of our mentors and has spent countless hours and done yeoman's work trying to help some of these men and the programs that we have. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that today, but I appreciate Pat having me here. And also John Walsh. John actually has done a fantastic job. He started as a mentor and got so interested in what we're doing and so passionate about it that he actually has signed up to be, in effect, a full-time mentor coordinator, and we're really appreciative of his work. As Jackson said, I want to talk to you a little bit about Veterans Court and what we do, and also to try to put this in the bigger context of what are called accountability courts. People like Senator Hill, who have supported us down at the legislature, are bringing this issue to the forefront, and so I wanted to try to put this into perspective, because I think as veterans you all probably have a general idea of what a veterans court is, but I want to try hopefully to touch on why we're doing this and whether or not what we're doing really works, or whether it's just to make us feel good, because I think the answer when you look at the evidence is not only is this something that we can do for veterans, but for anybody who has a substance abuse issue. But the fact of the matter is it works, and as taxpayers it saves us all money, and quite frankly I think it's the right thing to do. Let me see if I can get my clicker here to work. All right, I've got some slides. Okay, so what is a Veterans Court anyway? As I said, I know that you have all probably got some idea of what a Veterans Court is, and you may have also heard or read about something called the drug court. And these are called accountability or problem-solving courts. A behavioral health court or a mental health court is also the same genre of courts. What these courts are designed to do is to treat substance abuse or mental health cases outside the normal criminal justice system in a non-adversarial manner that's designed to address the underlying disorder rather than simply meting out punishment. And our veterans that we see would then have mental health issues, could be PTSD, it could be something worse, or they have substance abuse issues, drug and alcohol addictions, or both. As you know, taking drugs over a period of years, alcohol can also lead to depression and other sorts of issues, and these folks typically show up, or it's not unusual for them to show up on the streets and in court. So what a Veterans Court does, like a drug court, is to pull the offender out of the normal population and seek to treat that disorder. And one of the distinctions between a Veterans Court and a drug court is that we have this mentor program that you've heard us mention. And this is where we try to match our veterans, those offenders that come through our court, with a buddy. as they go through their recovery. And as veterans, these guys have people in the community like yourselves who are willing to step up and lend these guys a hand as they go through their recovery. So where are our veterans courts? This year, as I mentioned and was mentioned earlier, the legislature has recently passed a bill which establishes some rules for veterans courts that all future veterans courts will have to adhere to. And that's a great thing, but we actually have had several courts that have been operating prior to this legislation. Of course, the Atlanta Judicial Circuit, which is the court where I sit, Fulton County, the Talladega Circuit, which is Butts County, Monroe County, and Lamar County. They have a veterans court there. There's also one in Muskogee County and Chatham County. And the slide needs to be updated because I was talking to Judge Green, and the court in Cobb County is now operational. So we have them. We're going to start seeing more and more of these kinds of courts throughout the state. Now, how do we get cases? Let's see if I can get my slides in order here. Well, what would happen is a person might be picked up on a felony offense that winds up in Superior Court. Let's say it's a burglary. And during the defense attorney's representation of that client, the determination is made that the person is a veteran. And so the attorney could try to structure a plea deal to have the veteran referred to a veterans court as part of their arrangement. So there might be a deal, in other words, where the charges are dropped if the veteran successfully completes the program. Or it might be that the veteran pleads to the charges but is given a reduced sentence in the event he successfully completes our program. And I want to tell you that this is not a get-out-of-jail-free type program. Typically, they're 18 to 24 months of intensive clinical treatment of the substance abuse issue or the mental health issue, and that depends on the offender's progress. It can take an indefinite period of time. But this is not something where we check them into a program for 30 or 60 days, they dry out, and we release them. They're actually with us for an extended period of time. And because of that, there are occasions where someone will have a fairly minor charge, and they may very well opt to have probation because they don't want to have to continue to come back and see the judge over the course of a couple of years. So it's not something that they necessarily gravitate to as a way just to get out of jail. Now, what sorts of services do we offer? And this slide actually here shows you some of the folks that we typically see. These are folks that have felonies. They are nonviolent crimes. Usually they have a propensity towards substance abuse or mental health needs. And our program in Fulton County is open to any veteran regardless of their discharge status. We treat our veterans through an accountability infrastructure that we're fortunate to have in Fulton County. Some of the folks that we have working with us as our professional staff, or we have a vocational rehabilitation specialist who is on staff to assist defendants with resumes and job searches and actually coordinates a job fair to bring in prospective employers. We have a 16-bed shelter adjacent to our jail where we can house veterans who have urgent needs. We also have partnerships with various local groups for other housing. We have a facility called Hope Hall, where we actually have counseling that goes on a daily basis. And we have 2 case managers that follow these veterans as they go through the counseling and their recovery. And we have 4 dedicated sheriff's deputies on staff to supervise the offenders. And we also have a testing lab to do drug and alcohol screens. So what happens at court? The role of the judge is reduced, as are the roles of a district attorney and the defense counsel. As I pointed out earlier, this is a non-adversarial program, and some of you who have seen it would be surprised at what takes place. I want to talk to you a little bit about that. What the judge does is basically when someone is admitted into Veterans Court, the offender will sign a contract, and he agrees to abide by certain rules and regulations that require counseling, that require periodic tests, drug and alcohol testing. And so every couple of weeks, we'll bring those folks back to court and see how they're doing. And we have what are called our star calendars. And these are the folks that come in front of us. They're doing everything they need to be doing. They're truly stars. There's a lot of clapping hands, hugging, and praising and encouraging these guys. And, that may seem a little juvenile, but you got to realize where these guys are. The most serious drug and alcohol addicts are in a place where they really have zero self-esteem. Their families, their support system is nil. They have basically washed their hands of them. And so we see the courtroom for those guys that are doing good in their recovery. We see that, and we want to be a safe place where they can come in and talk to us about what's going on in their lives and try to give them some positive reinforcement. And we also have what are called OK calendars. These are guys who are, we're not really going to sanction them. They have some issues that we need to address and make sure that they don't flunk out of the program. Maybe they're not taking their medications as directed. There might be some concern, and it's kind of a cautionary calendar where we just warn them that there will be consequences if they don't shape up. And then we have the negatives, and these are individuals who have relapsed or screwed up in some way, and the judge will actually have to impose a sanction on those folks. And it could actually be a jail sanction where they're locked up depending on what they did for a few days. It could be work detail or something like that. But the premise of our court is that if someone tests positive on an alcohol screen or a drug screen on Wednesday, they're going to be in court on Friday, and there's going to be a sanction immediately. They're going to go to jail for 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, whatever it is. So there's not going to be a process where you get a ticket and you don't go to court for months. It'll be swift and certain. It's a carrot and stick approach, and that's really what the court is designed to do. Finally, if someone comes into our program, and this is not at all unusual, they can be terminated. If it appears to us that they are simply going through the motions, they've not bought into their recovery, those folks are simply terminated from our program, and their case will go back to the original judge, and they'll move through the system as any other case would. It's not a strike against them. It just means that our program could not help them. So that's a little bit about what our court in Fulton County is. And I want to, before we get to this slide, get kind of politically incorrect here, because I know a lot of you are thinking, that's all fine and good, but does this stuff really work? One of the criticisms in the community is that these courts are really called hug-a-thug courts. We're basically dealing with folks that should be in prison. And maybe the pendulum has swung back so far the other way that we're now in the business of rehabilitating people across the board as opposed to punishing them. So I want to talk to you a little bit about why it is that the legislature in Georgia is moving more into this area of accountability courts, and as I said, of which veterans courts are a part. And that's this. About 25 years ago, the last 25 years, the science of substance abuse and addiction science, neuroscience, has taught us a lot about the brain. And we know a lot more medically speaking about drug addictions and substance abuse than we did in past years. And the government actually defines an addiction as a chronic relapsing brain disease characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use despite harmful consequences. And it's considered a brain disease because drugs can cause changes to the brain. They change the structure and how it works. And this explains in part why people tend to cycle through the criminal justice system. They'll commit largely property, non-violent crimes to get money to go out and get high. And we see those cases as theft cases or burglary cases or fraud cases. They're a way to get make a quick buck and go out and buy some drugs. And it's certainly true that while the initial decision to take drugs is voluntary, when drug abuse takes over a person's ability to exert self-control, it can be seriously impaired. And I don't know if we have any doctors out there. I'm certainly not going to try to interpret these slides, but I can look at something and see. We now can do these PET scans, and you can actually see the changes, the organic changes to a brain that's on drugs. This is a slide I pulled off the Institute of Drug Addiction website, and it actually shows the brain and a 30-minute segment of time when that person is on cocaine. This is another similar change. So there are changes to the brain that we can observe, physical changes. And the medical community now thinks that when people begin experimenting with drugs during adolescence, that predisposes them to a life of addiction later, particularly with males. Males, the brain, we now know, continues to develop up until someone is about the age of 25. So you may have experienced this, or you may have observed it in people. I think it's clear that a veteran or someone who goes in the military out of high school or out of college gets involved in a stressful situation, and now in an era of multiple deployments where they're continuing to go back to Afghanistan and Iraq, and they begin experimenting with drugs, they use alcohol, they're 23, 24 years old, there's a very good chance the percentage, the likelihood that they're going to become an addict or an alcohol abuser is increased infinitesimally. So accountability courts are basically trying to incorporate some of this neuroscience into what we do to try to reduce the recidivism or the repeat offenders. These guys that are out there, we're not talking about the rapes, the murders, or the robbers. We're talking about the guys that go out and have 10 burglaries on their record, or they break into cars. They're nuisance crimes. But we've got to be able to treat those folks and keep them out of prison, because we simply can't afford to keep locking those folks up when we can treat them a lot cheaper in the community. And I've got some statistics. I don't want to cut too much into Cary's time. I've got a couple of things I want to make you aware of to put this into perspective. In 2011, I had the privilege of chairing the Governor's Council on Criminal Justice Reform. I want to give you some statistics I think that support the idea that so many men in our prisons actually have substance abuse issues. We had a prison population in 2010 of 56,000 in Georgia, and that was projected to grow to 60,000 by 2016. The national average was that 1 in 31 Americans was in prison or probation, but in Georgia it was just the inverse. It was 1 in 13. While Georgia's ranked 10th in population, Georgia had an incarceration rate that was the 4th highest in the country, and our prisons, as of 2010, were at 107% capacity. So if Georgia did nothing, if we had not gotten behind this effort to increase accountability courts and veterans courts, just to run in place, just to tread water, would have cost the state $264 million. So what we did was to look at those folks who were in our prisons and try to figure out whether accountability courts would work. And this slide gives you an idea of who was in our prisons in 2010. For the 2010 prison admissions, half the people going in prison had no prior prison commitment. 2/3 of those were there for this. I guess 66% were there for a nonviolent offense. 60% were there for a drug and property offense, and 1/4 of those had a mental health issue. And this is not unique to veterans, but it gives you an idea. Veterans have these issues as well. But this is an idea of the folks that are going into our prison system and why we wanted to take some steps to try to address these issues. Out of the prison population, there were 2,646 veterans in Georgia prisons. Now, not all of these folks would be eligible for accountability courts. A lot of those folks are in for the violent crimes. And again, we're really trying to deal with the nonviolent offenses. But as you can see, that's a substantial number, and given the cost that it takes to incarcerate somebody each year, there's a significant reason to try to reach out and help those folks. And these are the offenses that were the leading, the top 10 admission offenses for people in 2010. As you can see, 6 or 7 of those would be classified nonviolent: burglary, forgery, possession of cocaine, theft by taking. Those are all crimes that give some indication that a person has a drug or alcohol addiction. So clearly Georgia was right for the introduction of these courts. And so that's how we decided to tackle the $264 million shortfall that we had. And that's why you're hearing so much more about these drug courts and about veterans courts. But at the end of the day, as somebody who's a concerned citizen, as a taxpayer, as a veteran, I think the question has to be, do these courts work? And get to this slide. The last slide I wanted to leave you with is this. In 2010, Georgia's Inspector General performed an audit of the Georgia drug courts, and this is really before the expansion began. And what we found was that these courts were largely underused, but more significantly that the 2-year rate of recidivism dropped from nearly 30% to 7%. In other words, 2 years after release from incarceration, without any substance abuse treatment, you can expect 30% of the typical offenders to recommit another felony and cycle back through the system all over again with the taxpayers having to pay for it. But if they've gone through a drug court treatment program and successfully completed that, you can expect the number to drop down to 7%. And so that's the premise behind what we're doing. We're excited about it. As I say, the legislature has got behind this effort, and there are a lot of good things going on in the statement, and I think it's going to have a dramatic effect on the rate of recidivism in our state. So I'm going to go ahead and stop right there and turn it over to Cary King, who's going to give you some information about the nuts and bolts of what we're doing in Fulton County.
Thank you, Judge. Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, I want to tell you that we're now pretty much at capacity in the program. We can handle about 40 people in the program total. From the standpoint of the program overall, and secondly, from the standpoint of mentors, that will tell you that our theory is that we need one mentor per person, not one mentor who's handling 3 or 4 different people. And I say that because of the fact that in some of the other programs, like Buffalo, New York, Milwaukee, some of the other programs that have tried mentor programs, which is, by the way, what makes the Veterans Court unique is the mentor program. In some of those other programs, they've tried whatever mentor shows up on a particular court date would stand up with and meet with the mentee. And we have found, I believe Judge Markle will agree with me and Judge Bedford will agree with me, that we have found that the one-on-one is what works. So that will tell you that we need 35 to 40 mentors and a pipeline of mentors. I will also tell you that this organization, AVVBA, has been the most active in providing mentors. And I want to recognize those people now. Obviously, Judge Bedford was at the forefront of this and brought me in or ordered me into the committee. No, we're good friends, and he asked me to help, and I was more than happy. I want to mention, and I'd like you to stand up as I read your name if you're here. John Walsh, who is now the mentor coordinator. Please keep standing until everybody is announced. Ron Sherman, who is working on a SOP for mentors, because we started out at 0 base as far as a protocol for the mentor program. John Vale, is John here? Mark Walker, Herb Saunders, Al Brown, Dave Wallace, Steve Presser, Jim Stapleton, Pat Gartland, and originally Ed Shoemaker, and Ed, due to health reasons, had to drop out, but Ed was one of our active mentors. So if you add that list up, there's about 10 or 11 people on that list. And you know that we need 35 to 40. Now, I will tell you that some of the young Iraq and Afghanistan veterans have stepped in.
Sit down.
Huh?
You may sit down.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sit down, please. No, I wanted to stand up. Now, what exactly is a mentor? That we wrestled with that ourselves. So it's probably better if I without getting into Judge Markle's area, the Veterans Court is part of an overall accountability court, which means it's not, as the judge said, it's not a hug a thug. It is intended to help them turn their life around and make it better. You saw by the percentages how well it goes. The general overview is it was established in 2013. There was federal funding for the Fulton County program. I understand some of the other programs hadn't quite had good luck on that. It's a subcourt of the accountability courts. In Fulton County, it is very, very much, and I'm sure it's going to be in every county, a team effort. There are sheriff deputies, there are case managers, there are clinical staff that work with these people on a daily basis. It is, as you have heard, an 18 to 24-month program. They sign a contract when they go in. If they violate that contract, they can be sanctioned up to and including being terminated from the program. Judge Markle has had to terminate a few, but for the most part, I think it's gone pretty well, and I think the overwhelming number of people may have some setbacks. They may get a weekend in jail. They may get 30 days in St. Jude's to dry out if they have a relapse, but it's gone extremely well. The mentor subcommittee actually was organized in about December 2013, and 2012, excuse me. And Judge Bedford asked me and Scott Delius to work on that committee. And the court itself, as I said, there's several judges involved. But let's get to the mentor program. If I can get this thing to work. I'm going to have to write this down. All right, let me talk, forget the slides. Let me talk to you what it isn't, okay? Mentors are not intended to practice as lawyers. There are some mentors who are lawyers. The majority of mentors are not lawyers. They are not psychologists, nor are they expected to do therapy with the mentee. They are not, strangely enough, advocates. What they are is a talented, experienced friend who will give them a kick in the butt when they need it, help them stay on track, and will give them a pat on the back when they deserve it. The mentor, thank you. Is that better?
I don't know.
The mentors are expected to give somewhere around 8 hours per month. And part of that is meeting with the mentee or having frequent telephone conversations with them to check up on their status. Part of it is attending Veterans Court. Each mentee is required to appear in court. The Fulton County Court has a Veterans Court every 2 weeks on Friday. The mentor is expected to be there and assist the court and advise the court in part on the progress of the mentee. They're not there to be tattletales, but they are there. And Judge Markle, for example, will frequently say to them, well, how do you feel about that, Mr. Walker? Or how's Mr. Saunders, how's he doing? And the mentor very much is a part of this process. It is not, although each mentor can make some decisions on their own, it is not intended to be, I'm going to pick them up and be their carpool, but it is intended to bring back, the mentor is intended to bring back information from the mentee that's of assistance to us. And we discussed, a couple of months ago, we discussed what happens when the mentor sees the mentee doing something outside the program that's a violation of the program, because the mentors actually are part of the program. They represent the system over and above even the mentee. And the suggestion was made, and this is how we've done it. If a mentee is straying and the mentor knows about it, he talks to the mentee about it. He asks him, have you reported him or her? Have you reported this to your case manager? Have you discussed this with whatever the appropriate party may be, the clinical director, the therapist? And if the mentee says no, then the mentor suggests that that's a good idea, that's part of the program, you should go do that. And if that doesn't happen, then the mentor will, in many cases, say, all right, either you're going to be honest about your violations of the program, or I'm going to have to go to the case manager and disclose because you're violating the terms of the program. So that's the kick in the butt that's needed. The mentors, interestingly, when we started into this, we really didn't know what a mentor program was, and we weren't really sure what we were going to do with it because nobody in the country really had a mentor program that had been particularly useful. So we found a protocol from Buffalo, New York, and that's where we started. And as it turned out, they've come down here because they think our program is much better than theirs, and we have a much higher success rate. So what I want to do is make a plea to you, and it is a plea, it's a hope, that those of you who have the time to do this, it's one of the most rewarding things that you'll ever do, because you're working with a human being, and you're working with a human being who may turn his life completely around from where it was when he came into this program. We plan to have our first graduating class, because remember, it's an 18 to 24-month program. Our first graduating class should occur in December. The way I actually got my orientation to this is Jackson invited me to go to a graduation for the accountability courts, and I went with him, and I was so impressed with the speeches that were made by the people that made it through that accountability court, and I realized if we could do this for just anybody out there that's got a drug alcohol problem, and veterans are a special population. And we are a special population, so that we understand where they're coming from. We understand that at one point in their life, they achieved on the level of completing a basic training or airborne school or in many cases, combat. So if we know who they are, then we can help them. And we can work with these people and have worked with these people. Now, what happened is at some point we realized that the committee could not do everything. And so we asked two of the most active mentors, John Walsh and Ron Sherman, to help out. And they did. John is now the coordinator and has done a spectacular job with several mentees. Ron Sherman is now working on an SOP. So we're going to be a little bit more sophisticated next time. Since I can't read the screen, I'm going to read off my hard copy.
But you know it all anyway.
Well, I used to. Yeah, I was younger when I knew it all. As I got older, I realized I didn't know anything. So the mentor is the center of communication for the court system and for the mentee and for the program, whether that be the Fulton County Sheriff's Department or whether it be the police department. It's been a learning curve. You're probably thinking, he said a lot of stuff, I have no idea what a mentor does. It's something that you fall into when you come into the program. It's only 8 hours a month at the most. We need you, and more importantly, they need you. So please consider volunteering to be a mentor. And I will tell you this, I sit in the Veterans Courts in Fulton County. I go at least once a month, and I try to go more often, as does Judge Bedford and Scott Delius. And you can see these miraculous transfers, their personalities actually changing. There's a pre-treatment phase. They're very difficult in that phase. And then there's phase one, where they're drug tested every day, where they are checked every day. And then you start to see them breaking loose. It actually takes phase one before they actually start to understand what it's going to take to change their lives. So, again, thank you for letting me make a brief pitch here. If you want to sign up, you can call me, you can call John, you can call Ron, and we will put you on the list and we'll provide the orientation and training for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cary. Got time? All right. Real quickly, John Walsh. John, if you would care to make a few comments about your experience with the program, I think it would be helpful. John is our mentor coordinator and has accepted this responsibility, so he's gone beyond just working with the mentors.
We can't hear you from back there. You have to come up.
Best opportunity you have if you want to volunteer. talking about in these surveys, that nobody gets to know anybody because they don't get a chance to meet them. Join this organization. It is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done as far as volunteer in my life. They answer the call just like we did. They've got problems. They need help. A lot of them have been raised with no families. They need some kind of a mentor. They need some kind of a guiding light. And we can help them. We can help them. You can see it every time they go to court. And I'm telling you, there are times when your heart just absolutely wants to come out of your chest because you're so happy. And there's other times where you just want to sink in sorrow when they have to go to jail. So please, if you have any desire to get involved, come talk to us. We'd love your help. We would absolutely love your help. And that's all I'm going to say because I do it myself.
Okay. Thank you, John. And just moving on. And I just want to repeat that. I thank all of you who have participated so far because, like Cary said, if you've ever been to one of these graduations, it's really a powerfully moving experience to see the impact that you can have on somebody's life. If you have any questions, we can entertain some questions real shortly. I know we need to move the program on. Got up out here.
Yes, sir. As a journalist and member of the Georgia Press Corps,
I tried that.
all right, as a journalist and member of the Georgia Press Corps, I've interviewed over 300 veterans for my newspaper article called A Veteran Story. I know that key words can trigger very emotional responses from veterans, so I have to avoid them. My question is, I saw up there where it said non-violent. Please explain why non-violent is up there, and do you consider veterans that have violence?
Well, that's interesting because we were talking about this, Judge Markle and I, with another judge as we were leaving the court this morning, and she said, well, what do you take? And in this particular program, we made a decision early on to look at potentially violent experienced folks. Normally in drug court accountability courts, they don't take violent offenders because there are problems with having them with other people. They're just problems with violent offenders. But we are looking at these people individually because a lot of the violence that we've seen are it may be PTSD related, or it may even be some sort of drug level, a lot of domestic issues, which normally is not your armed robber, is not your ag assault person on the street, but an ag assault that occurred as a result of a violent outburst of temper or something along that line. So we're looking at those on a case-by-case basis. Judge Markle, is that correct? Judge Markle? Todd? Sorry. We are looking at folks with violent, violent crimes closely on if they've been submitted to us. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah, that's what
we actually look at the police reports to see
look at the police reports and see the circumstances. So we are trying to treat that part of the population. Any other questions?
Is this predicated on what they're charged with or what they're convicted of?
Because we got two ways to do it. Yeah, both.
That's a fairly complex question, but usually the charges will give some indication of whether they have a substance abuse problem. We also do there's an interview process where we do a risk and needs assessment to make sure that they're really going to benefit, to make sure that they're not somebody who's simply experimenting with drugs as opposed to being an addict. So we're trying to make sure that we get the most bang for our buck too. We've made a big investment into this. We want to make sure we're treating the people who can most best benefit from it.
How do we treat the conviction or non-conviction? How are we doing that? Are we running two lines? I think that gets...
Okay, well, so that would be something that is negotiated with the defense attorney. It might be that they actually don't enter a guilty plea, but if they can successfully complete the program, then the district attorney would drop the charges. Or it might be that they enter a plea and their sentence would be one thing, but if they complete the program, it'll be something lesser. So there are a variety of ways we can do it.
George?
Jackson, what states have veterans courts?
Yes, there are approximately, I think, 140 veterans courts throughout the United States. But the unique thing about this one is the one-on-one mentoring program, which is totally unique from our experience in talking to these people in Washington last December and all. So there might be some other folks that do it, but this is unique. And they're looking at us because if you're going to have success, we found and intuitively, you know, it's when you've got one guy with one guy. So yeah, in other courts they have like a 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 ratio or something along that line.
Programs at the end to, you know, make sure these guys got a reasonable employment outlook?
Do we have job placement programs? I think the answer to that is yes, with Judge Markle.
Yeah, one of the things, we have a vocational rehab specialist, and as I was saying, we have these job fairs, and we have several arrangements, partnerships with employers in the Atlanta area. I know we've placed some folks at Home Depot. John, help me out. What are some of the other employers we've used? Goodwill, Goodwill Industries, Home Depot, UPS, McDonald's.
Judge, could I? We have one.
There's one other aspect. I'm going to turn. I just want to add this too. In addition, we have gone out and we're continuing to go out through the State Bar and other organizations to try to get clothing donations. So when these guys go for job interviews, they are suitably dressed. You know, I emptied out my entire basement clothes that I had that I would never go wear it anyway, and I just kept them down there to make me feel better, I think. But so there's job placement involved in this. There's the mentoring program. There's clothing. There's, you know, these guys are getting it all if they stay in this program and behave themselves.
Let me represent this half of the room. My question is this: I'd like to talk about the caseworkers, who they report to, what they do in this program, and then what's the relationship between the mentor and the caseworker?
That's an excellent question, and I got to tell you, I can't completely answer it. And let me tell you why. The role of the judge, as I was saying earlier, is reduced. We have a professional staff. We should have brought them and introduced them because, like the mentors, they're really the heroes in this program. These are the folks that are working with them on a daily basis, and they're doing 12-step programs, overseeing those. They're having therapy sessions, group therapy sessions with these guys, all sorts of things like that. I'm not qualified to really tell you what goes on. From the judge's perspective, what I want to know is when they show up in front of me and I get a report from their case manager or the clinical staff, I want to know if they're participating, if they're seeing progress, and if they're doing what they've obligated themselves to do.
John,
Does that answer the question?
Let me help you with that question.
John can address it.
Now that I've been installed as a mentor coordinator, I'm asking all the mentors to please come to me with these issues because with all the people that are out there to help, we were using a shotgun approach. We had no specific path in which to take something to resolution. So now the caseworkers they will talk to me. So I go directly to the caseworker. We've got one caseworker now that's assigned to the 35 veterans. So before we had 2 or 3, we only have 1. We have 2 clinicians. So we have the side of the caseworker, and then we also have the clinician who takes care of the drug and taking care of the drug problems and addiction issues. So it's a lot more refined. It's not where it's supposed to be. It's not as refined as it's supposed to be right now, but we're trying to head that way. So when Ron Sherman called me up and says, "Hey John, I got a problem with so-and-so," I try to carry that banner forward, and I can go right up through the caseworker to the caseworker supervisor to the director of the drug program, who's a guy named Lee Brooks. Does that help you?
Who do the caseworkers work for? What department?
They work out.
Then what's the relationship between the mentor and the caseworker? Are you talking with each other?
Again, I've just been instilled as the interface because we were having too many people that had the attitude that the caseworker worked for them. So I'm trying to be a buffer, which is kind of funny because probably the least PC guy in this whole room is me. And somehow I've become this buffer. And that's what we're trying to work through now so we can get more responsiveness and we don't chase the same issue all the time.
Why don't you address some of that?
I've been a mentor since August, and I've only met the caseworker once. I don't interact with them. That's a different relationship. My job is to help this guy develop life skills and to work with him on his goals. What is it that you want to accomplish with your life, and what are you doing now to help that, to move that forward? And holding him accountable. Right now with my mentee, I'm working on his financial acumen. And it took 6 weeks to get him to the bank. I finally had to pick him up in the car and take him there to get him to open a bank account. Then the first thing he did was he spent every dime because his wife needed something. And so we had a rather robust discussion about that. And I was not a happy camper, and he could tell it. And so now I've got his attention. This is serious stuff. And the thing, this guy has spent 25 of the last 30 years in and out of prison. So he doesn't have any life skills. He's got some now. First thing I taught him was how to use a calendar. So that's the kind of thing, and you may never interact with the counselor.
All right, well, I know our time is running out, so we can follow up on this later on. Cary and I are always available. I actually did some handouts that I prepared for Veterans Day last year, which has some contact information in here, and if you want to pick them up, I'll put them on the table at the back going out. Also, I think Kurt's going to put out some information for us. But again, this is such an incredibly powerful program for these people, and those of you that have participated so far, we greatly appreciate it, and we invite any of you that have been interested in the program today to come down and join us and see if we can get you into the mentor program, because we don't want to leave any of these men behind. Thank you all for
Judge Markle. Judge, if you'd like to have you please come up for a second. On behalf of this association, we greatly appreciate you coming. And we actually going to give you a challenge coin, and there's certain mystery in this. Anytime you hold court, and you know, and you all know the challenge coin, particularly in Marine, what you do is you pull that out and put it down, and the guy on the other side doesn't have one, he buys drinks. Thank you. All right, gentlemen, thank you very, very much. As we typically do after every meeting within 2 days of this, we will actually send out follow-up information on what was presented here, announcements and so on. I will include an overview of the program to make sure you guys know who to contact if you have an interest. We have many volunteer opportunities. This is a particularly very interesting one. And Judge Green, I guess you are starting your program here, or it started already.
It has.
So you'll be looking for, are you going to have a coordinator like John Walsh, or is John?
I hope so. Let me just say
Certainly,
one thing.
right now, please.
I know everyone wants to leave, but
If you live or work in Cobb County, come help us out. If you live or work in Fulton County, help these guys out. I'm telling you, there is a huge need for this, and you have the opportunity to have direct interaction with a person, a fellow veteran, who's gone through what you've gone, that needs your help. You can make a dramatic difference in their lives. It's powerful stuff, I'm telling you. So if you live or work in Cobb, I'd love to have your help. Judge Reuben Green, you look me up online, you can track me down, I'll send you all the paperwork.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. Anyway, before we leave today, I want to make sure everybody knows that next month we're back on the regular schedule. It'll be the first Tuesday in August, which is August 4th.
Tell General Taylor.
Yeah, and General Taylor, that is August 1st, the first Tuesday. This year, yes, it's this year.